Welcome to Milton and King's On the Wall podcast, where we engage in conversations with artists, designers, and more. In this episode, we speak with Ben Heiway, Sales Manager, and Robin Patrick, Vice President of Sales and Marketing from Roman Products. If you enjoy these conversations, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and consider leaving us a rating and review. Robin and Ben, hello.
Hi, Chris.
How are you guys?
I'm well. How are you?
Oh, let's see. I didn't let Ben in yet. Hold on a second. There we go. Now we should all be together. Ben, are you there?
I am. How are you?
Good. Thank you guys for joining me today. How are you guys doing?
Great. Well, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. We love wallpaper. We love wall coverings.
Right. As do I. So where are you guys calling in from today? Are you guys both together or are you guys in different states?
No, I'll let Ben talk about where he is. I'm actually in North Central Florida. Our manufacturing facility and main offices are south of Chicago, but my home base and my office is actually in Central Florida.
Oh, okay. What about you, Ben?
Yes, I'm actually at the Calumet City plant today. So we are on the south side of Chicago, as Robin mentioned, in Calumet City.
Great. Before I kind of get into, I have so many questions. I may know some of the answers to some of these questions, but I'm gonna act like I don't because I feel like I know how I felt when I would sort of go on a website and look, or even when customers would ask us at Milton and King, like, what paste do I use? What primer do I use? And all that kind of stuff. And even as I'm looking at the website, I have questions of my own where I go, well, what's really the difference between this, and that? But before we get into all of the Roman products and that whole thing, if you guys could just maybe briefly just do an introduction each. Maybe I'll start with you, Ben. Like what your position is at Roman, how you got started, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my name's Ben Heiway. I'm the sales and marketing manager for Roman Products. I've been with the team for just about 3 years, so I've really worked to learn quite a bit about the whole building industry, at wall covering specifically, obviously in this role. Um, I started out in marketing as a marketing specialist, and I've kind of worked my way up in the company. And under the guidance of Robin, I've really come a long way and learned a lot.
Awesome. And where were you at before Roman, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what was your
I actually
background?
did marketing. I actually did marketing in the casino industry, so
Okay.
completely unrelated field. So definitely, that's why I say it's a different world for me. But I've really enjoyed it so far, and Roman's been a great place to work.
Where did you do the casino stuff? Was that like Atlantic City or?
So I worked at Horseshoe Casino just outside of Chicago.
Okay.
I did marketing, graphic design things there.
Oh,
So
cool.
mhm.
Awesome. And Robin, if you could kind of elaborate on your role, and I know you've been with Roman for a little while.
A little while. Well, it's been 2 decades and counting. So yeah, I'm at 24 years with Roman, and and prior to that, I actually came from a global company called Emerson Electric. So I have had the opportunity to work all over on every continent, but the last couple decades have been with Roman. And in my role as vice president of sales and marketing, I oversee those functions, and I work quite a bit, as does Ben and our entire team. We are so tied into the wall covering installing professionals. There are different groups out there, so we keep very close to the professionals who install wall covering because we serve them. We serve that market, and it's very important to us that we are listening to the professional individuals that install wall coverings for homeowners and businesses. So we spend not only doing traditional sales and marketing to customers who sell our products like home centers, paint stores, decorating stores, but also very tied into the end users, the DIYers and the professional installers.
Right. And so, which of you would be able to give me sort of like just a sort of a background history on Roman, the company itself?
Well, I'll jump in and do that. So we're um, uh, over 65 years old as a company. We started in New Jersey and then moved in the early 80s to the Chicago area. And over all those decades, we have acquired regional wall covering adhesives brands. So people will ask about, oh, what about Golden Harvest or Evans? Some people who are familiar with wall coverings over the last decades might recognize those names. It turns out that we acquired most of the regional wall covering adhesives and specialty companies over the years. So Roman, and we've migrated most of the branding to the Roman brand, easily recognizable, easily obtained. So we have a manufacturing facility and distribution. Everything is handled out of our facility where Ben is, in Calumet City, south of Chicago.
Hmm.
Everything is managed from that location, and we actually ship to 24 countries around the globe. So we really have a dominant position in this product category in the United States and Canada, but we also serve the globe.
Wow. And so I noticed when you just said like Golden Harvest, I know you still have a paste that's, I believe, still has the Golden Harvest label on it. I guess my question in relation to that is, when you said you've acquired these various brands, was that something as that was the result of just Roman expanding, or was it the result of, sort of those brands, just not like either kind of quitting or not able to continue, or what? How did that come about? Where you sort of were able to expand and kind of take over those other brands?
Combination of both, Chris. So, in some cases, the family owned business did not have a succession plan. And
Hmm.
so offered up to Roman to buy it because otherwise it had no future.
Gotcha.
In other cases, we were the party that's approached saying we'd really like this regional brand because we see the quality of that formula and we'd
Hmm.
like it and we'd like to expand it nationally. So a bit of both. Now recently, in a couple of years ago, middle of 2021, we acquired another brand that people familiar with this industry would recognize. A company called uh, Gardner Gibson had the wall covering adhesive brands of Dynamite. So we
Hmm.
did acquire those just recently, and really that they're two very uh, important formulas that they had that we really rounded out our assortment. So we picked up a what's called now Roman 234 Clear and Roman 111 Clay. Those two were unique formulas that really complete our assortment.
Now, are formulas at that level, are they proprietary?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, yes. It's funny because you think about how dear the Coca-Cola formula is, right?
Right.
To that company. Well, equally dear to us are our formulas, and we guard them very, very aggressively.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think that gives us sort of like a pretty good background as to, Roman's story, your guys' story, the reach of the company. Um, when it comes to like developing an adhesive or a primer or something like that, are you like at your location? I guess you said just south of Chicago where everything is based. Are there like laboratories? Are you like testing stuff all the time?
So yes, and that I'll treat that as two kind of a two-part question. So number one, yes, we have a lab, we have chemists, we have really strict quality control
Hmm.
technicians, and we pay close attention to what manufacturers are taking to the wall in terms of new materials. That helps guide us to develop and formulate the adhesives that will obviously bond these new wall coverings or wall materials to the wall, but also that work well with the professionals and the artisans in the wall covering world. Because it's interesting that you will have journeyman master wall covering installers, and then of course you have journeymen and master carpenters, but what they do and how they're trained is differently. So as different materials go to the wall, we want to make sure not only the formula is exactly right for the wall material, we want to make sure that it is appropriate for the professional that's going to end up installing that new material.
Have you ever had to pull a paste or an adhesive because of some issue and you had to kind of like pull it to make sure you got it right? Or is there so much testing and quality control that that sort of never really happens?
So I've been, as mentioned, I've been with Roman for 24 years. We have not had a product recall in my entire career with Roman. Now I'm not in a position to say it's never happened before that, but
Hmm.
but we have not. And you hit on it. We take retains of every single batch of product that we make. Those retains go through three very strict testings right in the lab, and we maintain those retains for several years. So if we were to receive a phone call where someone said, I opened this bucket of Roman adhesive, it doesn't look right, or doesn't smell the way I thought it was supposed to, we pull the retain and we do a robust analysis of it to make sure that nothing had been, no introduction of any biomaterial that would cause the adhesive to not be appropriate. So when that does happen, so much of the time the bucket had been opened and exposed to what I call variables on a job site. They
Hmm.
might have been exposed to something. Somebody used a rag or a brush or a roller that had already been contaminated. There could be reasons for someone to say, this doesn't look exactly as I expected it to.
Gotcha. And Ben, what do you find in terms of because Roman does seem to be so prevalent in the market? What are some of the challenges that you have in terms of really marketing the brand? I mean, is it already sort of like it's out there, it's going to be the choice of most people because it's the most available brand? Or are you still finding challenges sort of getting, Roman's name out there among wallpaper installers, or to wallpaper companies or to your DIYers? Like, what are sort of some of the challenges that are still there, if there are any in your mind, for promoting the Roman brand?
Sure. So there definitely are challenges. We do have a large market share, as Robin mentioned, but I think one of the biggest challenges is just education. I do spend quite a bit of time educating wall covering installers. I will do product demonstrations, and really what that's about is there are multiple different adhesives that we manufacture, and there can be multiple different adhesives that may be appropriate for different wall coverings. It's important for installers and whether they're commercial or DIY to understand all the features, benefits, and characteristics of the different types of adhesives. People say, "Well, why do you have so many different adhesives or different primers?" And one analogy that I think is fairly easy to understand and comprehend is why are there so many different types of hair products in terms of styling, gels, pastes, different hairsprays. There's different weights and types of materials in hair. It's the exact same in wall covering. So there's different weights. Some people have different. Uh, they have different preferences in the adhesives that they use. But for us, we always go back to what does the wall covering manufacturer specify in their installation instructions? And we're always going to refer to that if you call in and ask, hey, what type of adhesive should I use? So there's a lot of education that goes on from my standpoint in the marketing world. And I think that people being aware of the different products that we have, and their different characteristics and functionality really can be important in selling and making sure that people are using the appropriate products.
So are you going to trade shows and things like that?
I am. So we do a show in the fall called Tech Track that is put on by the Wall Covering Association. So the Wall Covering Association gets together, groups of manufacturers, and they bring those folks in, and we are able to expose those folks to more of the installation portion that they may not be accustomed to. So, a lot of times the manufacturers will send customer service people who may have questions about what actually happens in the field. So at something like Tech Track, we will bring all of our products, we'll line them all up, and I'll go through and give an overview of each product. We'll have all the pails open. You can come up, take a look at them, because oftentimes people don't get to see the product open to understand the differences in viscosity, consistency, what they may be used for. So we do Tech Track. Like I said, that's a WA event, Wall Covering Association. We do typically we do the WIA, which is the Wall Covering Installers Association, um, their annual conference, and we'll kind of do the same thing. And that one is where it's all the wall covering installers from around the country come, and we'll do the same type of thing. We'll educate them about the products that we manufacture and how they should be used and what the appropriate um, usage is. You get a lot of these installers that they get accustomed to one thing, and that's what they go to um, all the time. And there may be a more appropriate product for specific applications. Um, so yeah, we do quite a bit of hands-on training. I've been out quite a bit this year already at different trade shows and events, just helping promote our product and mostly educating people.
Do you find that most of your communication is to the trade and to brands and companies, or do you make yourselves as available to your consumer, to your retail consumer?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. We have retail partners, and I think it's all really kind of all encompassing because our trade people, we don't sell directly to consumers, so our trades people are going through our different retailers.
Hmm.
So we're making sure that our retailers have all the information that they need as our customers to be able to market and educate those folks that come into their stores. So there is that part of it where we're educating uh, not only the wall covering installers and the manufacturers, but we are also educating our customers in terms of those different retailers that we have around the country.
So I'm going to jump in and just add a little bit to what Ben is saying.
Sure.
So our kind of look at the people that use our products. There are the professional installers and professional paint and decorating people who make a living installing wall covering and other decorating items, and they work to in residential home, work for homeowners as well as businesses and conference centers and hotels and hospitals, schools. And then there's what we refer to as the DIYers who might maybe go to their local hardware store, paint store, or home center to pick up our product. because they're going to install themselves. We really work to make sure our website is healthy and robust and able to help the DIYer. And then during normal business hours, we have several people that man the phones. So we still will take the phone calls and do our best to help DIYers uh, work through their projects as well.
Okay, yeah, that was part of my question. Is can someone who's just gone to Home Depot and picked up a gallon of an adhesive and they have a question, can they go to Roman directly with that?
They can. The challenge is going to be, and this is the real challenge is on us to make sure our website is as good as it can be, and all of our YouTube videos are as good as they can be to be helpful, because we know that the DIYer is tackling this on Saturday and Sunday,
Right.
or maybe in the evening after work, and our phones are manned during basically 8 to 4:30 Central Time hours. So, and when we do take the phone calls from DIYers, we record everything. That helps inform us to make sure that we are updating our website and addressing the issues that are most pertinent with DIYers.
Well, speaking of educating the DIYers and that sort of thing, I think would probably be a good time to actually get into some of the individual products, because I know that I've obviously, as someone who works for a wallpaper manufacturer, have had some experience with adhesives and primers and things of that sort. But even myself, when I go on the website, as I mentioned earlier, I'll look at it and go, okay, well, what's really the difference between this one and that one? Like, how would I know which one to get? So I'm not sure, Ben or Robin, which of you want to take some of these questions, or maybe you both can, or jump in whenever you feel like it. But I do have like a series of questions and sort of comparisons between the different adhesives and primers that hopefully we can get into, and you
We
can
we
clarify.
We can, but before we do that, I'd like to go back. There's something that you asked in a two-part question, and then we kind of we zipped past the second part, and it
Sure.
had to do with testing.
Yep.
So we do, and Ben actually at our company spearheads this. For wall covering manufacturers such as Milton and King, you might have a new line and you would reach out to us and say, hey, we've got this new line. We're working with maybe a new backing or a new thickness of a vinyl coating, or maybe you have a new PVC product, PVC free product that you'd like to make sure you've got your instruction sheets just perfect. So Ben will actually contract with professional installers in the Chicago market, have them come in and do test installations of the wall covering. They do the test installations and then make their recommendation. Oh, this one should have a this type primer, and this type adhesive, or these primers plus these adhesives are perfectly appropriate for this material. The reason I bring that up is something that Ben said. At Roman, we do extensive testing to help wall covering manufacturers and distributors identify the optimum adhesive and primer combination. We also always first line when someone asks, what should I be using? We say, please refer to the manufacturer's instruction sheet and exactly what do they say. A lot of times that has to do with the wall covering manufacturer's warranty, and that company expects you to follow as a DIYer or installer, to follow their specifications in order for their warranty to be upheld.
Right, because they'll be specific towards their product that they're supplying. So they may be the right people to ask or to take advice from, because they're,
Or
yeah, go ahead.
exactly, but also that we trust them, and we work with so many of them that we've in more than half the cases we would have done the testing for them. So we are confident too that that for the most part they're selecting the correct the optimum adhesive and primer. But then now to answer your big question, when would I use which adhesive? When would I use which primer? And why are there differences? There are variables on every job site and every
Mm-hmm.
home and every business that may understanding those variables help you to choose an adhesive or a primer or a combination that makes sense for that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So an obscure one would be, oh, a houseboat.
Right.
You think about the level of swings in temperature that is going to be exposed to, and the extreme swings in humidity levels that it will be exposed to. That will inform an installer's decision on which
Right.
adhesive primer to use.
And the salt in the air and
Good
everything else.
point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good to know. So I would like to dive into some of these elements. I think I would like to get into the primers first, I guess, since that's what people should be doing before they put wallpaper up anyway. So it'd be good to sort of get into the primers a little bit. Just some more specific questions that I had in terms of individual product. For example, so a lot of times when someone has, a dark back, like say a black wallpaper or a dark blue wallpaper, something that's got a solid dark color, oftentimes we'll tell them, usually the advice is to make sure you put, a paint or something similar to the color of the wallpaper in the back, because if there's ever seams or if you're not perfect with your installation or you haven't applied enough pressure, that sort of thing, then you could always have bits of the wall peeking through. And if it's a similar color, you're not going to notice that as much. I noticed that a couple of the primers say that they're tintable, um, and others don't say whether they are or not. So, for example, your primer Pro 977 says it's tintable. Um, is there something about that particular primer that makes it tintable, and are others really not tintable? If you can explain the differentiation between those two types of primers, and what
Sure.
sort of tints can you tint it any color you want? How far
So
does that go?
the 977 Ultra Prime is your go-to wall covering primer, no question. It it has titanium dioxide in it, which makes it white. It also dries to a nice hard finish. The reason the hard finish is a characteristic is because when you're pattern matching, you're installing your wall covering, that the 977 primer, that hard surface allows for slip. So you can slide your wall covering around, and it will help you when you're really doing a fine job matching your pattern perfectly. Then that composition of that primer allows for up to 4 ounces of a paint colorant. So any paint store that you go to, you can request up to 4 ounces per gallon of colorant. And we love what you're saying, Chris. We think it is brilliant to tint the 977 primer so that should there be an open seam that at any point that it will be invisible by doing that. We think that's great. The when you ask the question about any colorant, it will be really hard with 4 ounces of colorant in a gallon to achieve a true black or a true red or any of the really saturated dark colors.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to get there, but with the patterns of wall covering, you can get close. We just don't want to mislead anyone into thinking you're going to get a true apple red or a true midnight black.
Right. So you're more just kind of going towards that shade in that
Yes.
direction,
Yeah.
as opposed to just white.
Right. Right. Now and when you open a can of the 977, you will see it really will look to you like paint or white paint. and it has that flow and that characteristic. The other specialty primers, they all have different colors, but they tend to be milky and much thinner. And so the adding the colorant, it's just going to be very, how do I put this? Not going to make the impact that you're looking for. It
Mhm.
won't hold the color that the 977 will, because it's not formulated to.
Gotcha.
The other thing is, we don't, the other specialty formulas have very specific jobs to do. Adding the colorant is changing the formula.
Mm.
So are you familiar, when you're looking around, do you see the 935, sometimes referred to as R35 primer?
I believe I've seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah, that primer, when it dries, it has a serious residual tack. So it is sticky, and it
Hmm.
remains sticky, and it's a milky color, not meant to hold a colorant. The reason it's sticky is it's meant to be applied to surfaces that are difficult to bond with. So think about a formica surface,
Mhm.
glass, maybe a melamine, or a paneling that has a coating for cleanability on it. So those non-porous surfaces need a little more grab. And so the 935 is an adhesion promoting primer for a very specific job, for example.
Hmm. Interesting. And so, let's say someone was going to put a, they were going to primer their wall, and they wanted to. Let's say they wanted to. I'm just thinking of like a more extreme case. Like they want to have a black wall because they're putting up a black wallpaper, and they use a tintable primer. Would it then? I guess it would make more sense than to do a primer and then a paint, like a certain sort of, or does is the primer always should the primer always go over the paint? Like, I'm just trying to think, if
So,
someone wants like a black wall but they want to primer it, how would you recommend approaching that?
so in that case, if you're using one of our primers, we don't recommend or require that you use paint. Also, it's we don't need to do that. If there's paint on the wall already, then you're going to pick a primer that will in fact bond with that paint, which is a little bit different. Now you're asking a very specific question. You're hanging a wall covering that's dark and you want a true black.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, you might want to use a primer. So let's say you're starting with new drywall that has no paint on it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a primer called Pro 999, sometimes referred to as RX35.
Mm-hmm.
The 999 is a primer meant for new drywall or other very porous surfaces. So it is absorbed. There's a percentage of the primer that's literally absorbed by the drywall
Yep.
and creates a beautiful bond. In that case, and you want black, then over that you would then use a good quality black latex paint. And then you that a good quality latex will give you some slip for installing your wall covering. But
Okay.
for the most part, paint does not have to be in the equation. It's the right wall covering primer with the right wall covering adhesive.
Gotcha. And the is it the 909? That's the one for vinyl. Is that right?
We call 909, the branding called vinyl prep, meaning preparation for a vinyl wall covering.
Mm-hmm.
That is a great primer for a sound painted wall. That's exactly what it's for. So I have this beautiful wall, and I used quality paint, 6 years ago, and now I'm going to hang beautiful wall covering on that wall.
Mm-hmm.
I can just use the 909 primer. It's going to give me the surface I want in order to hang my new wall covering.
Okay. And if they want to do vinyl on let's say a not beautifully painted wall? Would they do use something different for a primer?
Well, that's where we kind of look at the problem solving and the variables on the job site. So w- I'll give you one example. So I installed my wall covering 15 years ago, and my style has changed and my tastes have changed, and I pull it down. When I pull it down, oh, I have some torn drywall, I have some patching to do, and I have some residual paste on the wall. So in that case, we would recommend you would use the 999 primer because as I mentioned, it'll absorb into that porous surface and give you a slight residual tack. So now I can hang my new wall covering. That was a little bit of a problem on that wall. Maybe you, Chris, can give me, with your experience, with your your own background, can you throw at us an example of a problematic wall?
Oh, I guess it would be like you said. I mean, you know, there's there's times where people have taken wallpaper down, and unfortunately, if they've had to scrape extra off, they've had to actually dig into the wall, or some some of the actual like drywall would be showing because they've had to take off, get into like for example your old school wallpaper that isn't like today's stuff, where they've actually taken torn out pieces of the wall so that maybe drywall or is being exposed. I mean, that's what I would think. That's what immediately comes to mind as a problematic wall.
Yep, and I think that's probably a great percentage of them. So you obviously you need to spackle and get your smooth surface, and then we're going to say use the 999 because we want the primer to soak in and really bond with that drywall, because when it's time to pull it down, you want your wall covering, and as you said, the newer technology in wall coverings and the backings allow for a much better removal when you're ready to redecorate without destroying your drywall.
Now, maybe Ben can speak to this in light of what you just said, Robin. I'm guessing it is what it sounds like, but maybe you can just clarify. So when something says like for the 977, it says it promotes strippability. Is that just referring to removal of the wallpaper?
Yes, so strippability refers to removing a typically a fabric backed vinyl from the wall. So what happens is, let's say you use a strippable adhesive like the Pro 880 Ultra Clear Strippable. When the adhesive is drying, the moisture evaporates, and that allows the starches in the adhesive to bond with the wall. When it's time to remove that material, as you pull it away, the starch actually fractures away from that hardened um, primer, the 977, and we call it unzipping. You can actually hear it fracturing away from the wall. So yes, the term strippability refers to um, the removability of a wall covering, and like I said, typically that's in reference to a fabric backed vinyl wall covering.
Okay, so if someone was, let's say, just because like Milton and King, most of the stuff that's on that people are going to get on the website, unless you're in the trade and getting vinyl, most of it's just the non-woven type of wallpaper. Um, is that something that is applicable at all in that situation? Does it provide assistance for removing that sort of thing, or is it sort of just you know not really made for that? Because I mean, the non-woven seems to come off just fine anyway. But
Hmm. Hmm. It does. The non-woven is such it really was such a game changer for wall covering. The way that the non-woven backings are meant to be strippable. So, but to Ben's point, if you use the 977, you're just going to take that extra step and use the 977 primer. The non-woven, it'll pull down beautifully in full strips. It won't pull apart. You need little bitty, bitty little bits of pieces of paper. The non-woven backings are meant to remove in full sheets.
now, does it make sense to use a strippable primer as well as a strippable adhesive?
That for nonwoven, it just happens that the 977, which promotes strippability, and the 880 ultra clear adhesive, which is formulated to be strippable, most non-woven the residential weight non-woven wall coverings,
Hmm.
that the recommended adhesive is going to be 880. You just end up that combination gives you so much comfort with strippability in the future, because you've got a non-woven backing actually designed and engineered to be strippable. You have a primer that promotes strippability, and you have an adhesive that's formulated to be strippable.
Right. Okay. That was basically my question. It's just so it does make sense to do, and like you said, it will give your DIY installer some peace of mind in terms of one day removing the wallpaper. All right. Well, I wanted to get into the primers. I'm sorry, the paste now a little bit, um, because I did have some questions there. Um, oftentimes we'll get installers who call us, and everyone seems to have their favorite paste, and some say, oh, you should use this, and some say you should use that. Um, and I know we spoke previously just a little bit on this in a previous conversation when we were setting up this podcast, but I'd really like to dive in and get you to explain um, the different consistencies for the paste when it comes to not even when it comes to just stuff for non-woven. There are different consistencies that you would probably recommend differently for someone who's your first time or DIY installer as opposed to your professional installer who's really quick at installing wallpaper. Um, can you elaborate on a little bit on the let's say the consistency of the paste and what might be more suitable for your installer versus your DIYer?
You can take that, Ben.
Sure, sure. So typically a clear, which is a most of the time is a cornstarch based adhesive. It has a little bit more of a flowable, runny, watery consistency. It has a higher moisture content in the product, and oftentimes that the moisture content is needed on a material that could potentially expand. So if you have a product that's going to absorb moisture and expand, that's typically when it's suggested that you book the wall covering before you go to the wall. That allows the material to expand, and that way you don't have issues when you get to the wall uh, with your seams, the expansion causing changes in your seams or at your edges. Um, I would say that most of the time, uh, most DIY type folks are going to find the clear adhesives like the Pro 880 Ultra Clear Strippable, the Pro 838 Heavy Duty Clear, and even the Roman 234 Premium Clear. Most of the time, they're going to find that a little bit easier to use than a clay based adhesive or a resin based adhesive. So the clay based adhesives, such as the Pro 774, uh, that's the clay strippable. We have the Pro 732, the extra strength clay, and then the Roman 111 clay. So obviously, I've mentioned clay quite a few times. Those products actually have clay in them from Georgia, and they have a higher solid content, and they're thicker, they're heavier. Uh, that thickness and kind of heaviness uh, provides more of an initial tack, and it's gonna also create a stronger bond ultimately. So those can be a little bit more difficult to work with in terms of comfort level in a beginner, but ultimately you're probably only going to be using an adhesive like that if you're hanging a commercial type material, rigid panel system, wood veneer, wall protection systems, things that most DIYers probably aren't going to be hanging anyway. Um, So, I think most of the time the material that a DIY type person is going to be hanging, a clear adhesive is going to be appropriate. But again, we're going to say, check your manufacturer's installation instructions. Um, and then finally, we do have our resin based adhesives, which have a thick, kind of more difficult to use consistency. So like our Pro 555 Extreme Tack, that's an adhesive that you're going to roll on or brush on. It is a resin based adhesive, so it is going to create a strong permanent bond, which will not be considered strippable. If you use that, you're going to have a permanent wall covering. So yeah, typically we would say a clear is going to probably be the easiest for a DIY type person to get accustomed to. Your clays are something more a professional installer or commercial installation would use.
Okay,
Um,
so for just your non-woven, your typical, I guess, would be medium weight non-woven wallpaper. You're not really using clay for that, are you?
Not typically, no.
No. Okay. So what is the real difference, I guess, between the 880 and the 838?
So the 880 is kind of an all weight, all purpose adhesive. It's designed to hang very light, delicate papers, medium type, vinyls, and it can even hang some heavier materials. So it kind of all encompassing. It's also considered strippable, as we discussed before. The 838 is a heavy duty clear. Um, Honestly, I would say when you open the two up in terms of viscosity, you probably find them to be very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Really, what it ultimately kind of boils down to is the grades of starches that are used. So it's a different type of starch that's used in the 838. While it is still a cornstarch based adhesive, it's just a different cornstarch. And the 838 is something that you would typically use on more of a commercial weight type 2 or type 3 vinyl, a heavier material. 838 is also not considered strippable. So again, it's one of those things where you're going to want to check with your manufacturer, and it also depends on the type of material that you're hanging.
So the
Right.
880,
So
sorry, go ahead,
I'm
Robin.
gonna I'm sorry, I'm gonna jump in on that. So when we're talking about a non-woven backing and a residential type material, then the 880 gives you something that's called open time. The 880 has more open time than the 838. So if I'm a pretty darn good DIYer, I can use the 838. It's going to dry faster. It's going to set up faster. I have less open time to work, to match my pattern, to make sure I've got my seams just right. So the beauty of the 880, you have extended open time. So as a DIYer that maybe only hangs wall covering every few years, I need that open time. I need time to match my pattern. I need a little more time to make sure my seam is perfect. And oh gosh, when I get to the corner, an inside corner, an outside corner, I definitely need more open time to really do do the job I want for my home. So the 838 will you don't have as much open time. It's going to dry and set faster.
Gotcha. Okay, so 880, more of a watery substance, doesn't dry as fast. So your beginner or your person that's more new
Yeah,
is,
and I don't know that it's watery. I really don't think it is. It has a, we call it flowable. It will flow, but it's not watery. It's just, as Ben mentioned, the different starches.
mm-hmm.
So the starches in the 880 are meant to stay wet longer than
Okay.
the 838. Because we call the 838 heavy duty, it's for heavier material in general. You want it to tack up faster, right? You
Mm-hmm.
want it to hold the heavier material to the wall. You want that initial grab to be stronger.
Okay.
And that really plays into how the 838 is formulated.
Gotcha. Now, what about the 543? When I go to the website or when I go to like Home Depot or Lowe's, it seems like the 543 is I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this because you would know better than I would, but just when I'm sort of, if we've had customers that are looking for something, I always find the 543 the most readily available. Um,
It
I don't
is
know
from
if
the
that's the case.
no, you're spot on. So you will notice at this moment in time, Lowe's, every Lowe's store carries the 543. At this moment in time, the Home Depot is carrying the 880. Now, the 543 was actually formulated for DIYers. It is white and it flows. It definitely flows. It will pour right into your paint tray, and you can use a roller to roll it onto the wall. Very easy to work with, meant for a DIYer. It has a little bit of resin in it, so it's a little bit different formula than the 880 or the 838. It is considered a clear, and again, formulated to flow easily rolled on, very DIY friendly.
Is that strippable as well?
It's not it is particularly with a non-woven wall covering, and it is if you've used the 977 primer, because those two together will promote strippability. One of the things about the 880, when we say it's strippable, it's called dry strippable.
Mm-hmm.
So by itself, new drywall, 880 on new drywall, you don't need to have a primer, and it will strip. And I have I was at a major event at Walt Disney World, and the Swan and Dolphin, for those of you who know Disney, and they were pulling down wall covering and hanging new commercial wall covering. And I thought, oh, this is too good. I'm standing right here watching it, and I knew that they had used the 880 in the first place 5 years ago, 5 years before. That commercial wall covering came down unbelievably beautiful. Not a tear to that drywall. It was perfect. They went right back to the wall with new wall covering with 880 without doing anything, any priming. So we say dry strippable. We're talking about will strip just dry off of new drywall. The
So,
reason
sorry,
But
go
the
ahead.
977, we like that because marrying the 977, which, as Ben mentioned, promotes strippability. And when he was talking about how the starch breaks, crackles, unzips from the 977, so the 543 that you could find at a home center, particularly if you use 977, it's going to be able to break from the 977. But the other piece of the equation, Chris, is that non-woven backing.
Mm-hmm.
So the non-woven backing is meant to pull away in full strips when it's time to remodel, redecorate.
So, you're saying that you can use the 880 on drywall with no primer? So the moisture wouldn't
And
soak into the wall, and you wouldn't have any problems with that?
so a professional using a commercial install, absolutely. We would not recommend that for a DIYer. It's fraught. The professionals do this for a living. They know what they're doing. They know how they hang fast. They
Mm-hmm.
hang so fast. So they use pasting machines, and they're pulling 10 foot, 12 foot, however tall those ceilings are. They're pulling 54-inch wide wall covering up to 12, 18 feet long, and it goes through that pasting machine, gets booked for 5 minutes or so, and then you've got a team, a crew that then goes right to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different, really a different operation than what you would do in someone's home.
I noticed that the Golden Harvest 34 is a wheat-based product, right? So
Yep.
what is the benefit or the difference? Like, why wheat? What does the wheat do?
It's very gentle. It is a very gentle starch. So it's interesting that you are familiar with the GH34. That is the one formula where we kept the reference to Golden Harvest. That's what the GH stands for,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many seasoned professional installers that have used that product for 30 plus years. And so we didn't want to make it too hard for them to find that product.
Mm-hmm.
So the wheat starches are very gentle. That product is ideal for what's called English pulp paper. Think about super delicate painted papers. That that is a very gentle adhesive that works very well with pulp paper. The other thing is there are wall coverings out there that are hand painted that are just exorbitantly expensive. That literally in mansions on Lake Michigan, I've been there when they've pulled down some of this wall covering and they actually saved it to go into the next mansion because it's hand painted, it's beautiful, it's so expensive. So the GH34 is the adhesive they use for super delicate papers.
We also mentioned on the site that it's good for grass cloths. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, because of the natural fibers. So it's a great adhesive for cork, natural pulp paper, the English products, and even the non-woven grass cloths. And the only thing you have to check with that is the weights. If it's a real heavy, like a sisal type
Mm-hmm.
heavy or a hemp, you might need a little more oomph from your adhesive than the GH34.
And what would you recommend in that situation?
Going up to the 838, possibly. Again, I would, number one, like Ben said, always I would check with what the wall covering manufacturers have tested and what they want. Then I would evaluate the variables: heat, humidity, temperature swings, any other variables on the job site. But it would be reasonable to say an 838. But you touched on something earlier about installers that have a preference,
Mm-hmm.
and Ben touched on that as well. They the They're installers who in their truck maybe have almost all 774 clay and then maybe a couple of buckets of 838 or 880, but they're so good. They know how to read the situation, they understand the variables, and they're fast. And so a clay, and they don't get adhesive on the front of the wall coverings.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can work with clay because they're fast. They know they can do their seams quickly, match patterns quickly, and they will not deposit clay on the front of the wall covering. Ben mentioned something earlier when he said the clay comes from the ground in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
So that has a red hue to it. So you really don't want to have clay deposited on the front of your wall coverings. It's not catastrophic if you do, but it's not a good standard operating procedure.
Right. Ben, what is it meant when they say that a paste is machinable? Is that referring to like the machines that the installers use to apply the paste, or does it mean something else?
Right. Yes, that's exactly it. A machinable is for it means it's optimized for a pasting machine. So, to Robin's point earlier, she made about the adhesive being flowable. You want the adhesive that you use in a pasting machine to be flowable because basically what it is it's a machine with a trough that you fill up with adhesive. You put your roll of wall covering on the back of this machine, and then there's two rollers that roll the paper through, and it just catches the right amount of adhesive out of that trough from onto the bottom roller, and it applies it onto the back of the wall covering just perfectly. So if you're working with a material or an adhesive that's too heavy or too thick that can't kind of flow, it won't work properly in a pasting machine. So yeah, absolutely. Machinable is referring to use in a pasting machine.
Okay, great. So it sounds like, just for Milton and King's circumstances, pretty much for our non-woven, you're going to want to use the 977 for the priming and the 880 for your install, unless you're a professional or there's some other circumstance on the job that would change what you would need under various different environments or circumstances or something like that. Um, I've already had you guys for an hour, but I would, if you have just a few more minutes, I did want to go over some of your remover products. Hopefully briefly. Are you guys okay with a couple more minutes?
Sure.
We're good.
Okay, great. We were talking about how, like, if you use the 880 and it's strippable, and if you have the 977 with the 880 and you're using a non-woven, it's going to come off fairly clean, pretty easily, and dry. Um, is there a circumstance where is it going to hurt to use a remover? Like, I noticed you have there's a spray and there's a gel. If you could kind of elaborate on that situation, I'll give you sort of an example of an actual, like, real world circumstances. Um, a lot of people who are in apartments or situations where they have to be careful of what they do to their walls, because once they move out, all situations like that where they're going to have to either repaint or do something. um, I had one particular person who used the wallpaper in their apartment, and I don't believe they primered. They just put it on the paint that was over, already on the walls. But they used a remover, and it just, basically, once they used the remover, the wallpaper just sort of beautifully fell off. You wouldn't even know there was, after they used the remover, maybe they had to use a sponge to wipe the wall down and get any sort of excess paste off the wall. Um, but would you say that, in a situation like that where someone's in an apartment, but they like to use the non-woven, but they're a little nervous because they don't want, the wall to get damaged, and they can't really paint or primer, so they have to just sort of use what's there. Do you think it would be fairly safe to use, like, a remover solution on a non-woven that's maybe used just the 880 paste to put it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, the removers are designed. They have enzymes in them that are designed to kind of eat through the starches, and the moisture content in them also helps to re-wet that underlying adhesive. So really, what you're doing is you're re-wetting the adhesive. The enzymes in them in the remover are, kind of working on those starches, and that's what really helps it come down easily. We sell a tool, a scoring tool that is designed to perforate the face of the wall covering. That allows the remover to penetrate more quickly and work more quickly. And it depends on, what the size that you're working with. So if you have a huge area that you're going to be removing wall covering, we might suggest a concentrate, because then you can add water to that and make a large amount of remover. The liquid's good; it penetrates right in. It works really well to kind of break down those adhesives, as I mentioned. And then finally, the gel that we have, the gel helps it to cling. So if you have a wall covering that you're really just having difficulty getting down, that gel clinging on there will allow the moisture and those enzymes and things to really kind of work and give you more time without the liquid running off. So
Mm.
I would say, no, there should not be any issue with using a remover. The one thing that I would say is if somebody's used, a resin based adhesive in the past, if they use something like a 555, an extreme tack adhesive, which hopefully no DIYers using in an apartment, but if something like that happened, the remover really isn't going to be helpful, because it that resin based adhesive isn't water based, and it's not got starches in it to be broken down.
Okay, gotcha. So it definitely needs to have those elements that are made for the remover to break
Yeah,
down. Yeah,
yes, that's correct.
that makes total sense. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, that's sort of a situation that we're sort of always seems to come up for customer services. People going like, I don't want to put it up because I can't. I don't want to have to worry about taking it down. And we have information on our site where it says you can do the dry removal, but you can also do the wet removal if especially if you're really really concerned that maybe as you pull the wallpaper up, you might tear the paint or something. So the removers are safe on the paint. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. There, we would always, if you can, we in any process, whether you're, getting ready to prime or you're doing your adhesive or you're doing a remover, we always suggest doing a compatibility test in an inconspicuous area just to make sure, because there's so many different paints, primers, materials, environmental factors that we've talked about earlier, that if you can get into an area that's inconspicuous behind a door, somewhere that's less visible, and just do a little test before you get started in any project, hanging the wall covering, like I said, removing it, whatever it may be. Just do a little bit of a test to make sure. But typically, a high quality latex paint, you're not going to have much issue, or if any issue at all.
Okay. um I guess we can wrap it up there. I really want to thank you guys for joining me. Is there anything else that you guys would like to say or promote, or any new products you have coming out, or any sort of last words for the podcast?
So I'll take the last word, and that is that to watch for the future, because we're seeing that what people choose to put on their walls, what designers are specifying that goes on the walls. And you mentioned it when you mentioned grass cloth. We're seeing trends and changes. So we launched new products to line up with what is happening with walls. That so hammered metal and reconstituted wood and different materials that are now being used. Brick veneer, that's really picking up steam. So we take our role in the industry very seriously and make sure that we're developing products to meet the needs of whether you're a homeowner or a business owner or you run a massive convention center. What you choose to put on the wall, we want to be your partner in making sure it bonds.
Thank you both so much, Robin and Ben. I really appreciate you spending your time with me this afternoon. We should connect at some point in the future, whenever there's a new product launch or something else down the line. We can just touch base and check in with you.
Well, we appreciate that, and thank you for this opportunity, Chris. And we we appreciate Milton and King. We love your patterns, and we love that we love the opportunity to be able to support and work with you.
Yep. Thanks, Chris.